Welcome to JD's Prep. All right, so we have an experiment here carried out to determine the effect of exposure to UV light on the growth of bacteria. So we have petri dishes. Bacterial cells are spread on the petri dishes, and then half of the dish is shielded from the UV light with a UV screen. Okay, the other half is fully exposed to the UV light for various amounts of time, so different amounts of time of UV light exposure, and then after that treatment, the bacteria are allowed to grow in an incubator. The number of colonies are counted, so we're able to see, hopefully, how the bacterial colonies are impacted by that UV light. The setup of the experiment is here, and the data table is here. So looking at our data table, we have exposure time to UV light, so no exposure up to 10 minutes of exposure. We have the colonies on the screened side, so the ones that were not exposed to the UV light, and the colonies that were exposed to the UV light. So I always like to take a moment to kind of just look at the trends. Okay, so as the time of exposure goes up here, we see not a ton of change here for the colonies on the screen side, a range of 20 to 24, not in any particular order. So I'd say we don't really have a trend there, but we do have a pretty significant downward trend there, where the colonies on the unscreened side, so the ones that were exposed to the UV light, the longer the time it was exposed, the less colonies we have. All right, so on to the questions. There's two questions associated with this. You're supposed to analyze the experiment that produced the data in the table, and in your answer you want to state a hypothesis for the experiment. State a hypothesis, and then state whether the results of the experiment support or fail to support your hypothesis and support your answer. Okay, there's a lot of different kind of wordings and things for this question that would be acceptable. The really important thing they're looking at is that you kind of know how to state a hypothesis for an experiment and then know how to support that hypothesis. So take the results of the experiment to see if it supports your hypothesis or not support your hypothesis, but for that analysis to be a follow-up of that hypothesis portion. So a reasonable hypothesis might be the longer that the bacteria are exposed to UV light, the less the bacteria will grow, or any sort of version of that. Then, as a result, I would then look at the data and note that the experiment supports that hypothesis because the longer that the bacteria is exposed to UV, we see less colonies of bacteria that are being grown. Okay, some sort of reference to the actual results in reference to your hypothesis is what they're looking for. Okay, thank you for using JD's Prep.